Hello, welcome to today's webinar. I'm just going to wait a moment so that everyone can join. Now, today's webinar is based on Spelling Shed, with orthographic mapping being our main focus today. My colleague Rob Smith, who owns the Literacy Shed, made this PowerPoint with me today. And we've decided to look at orthographic mapping as it goes really nicely with our new spelling scheme, which is launching in September. And this new spelling scheme really looks at different ways to learn more complex spellings, particularly for Key Stage 2, and looking at orthography, etymology, and morphology. So we've got a couple more webinars on the other two coming up. Now, just a quick introduction about what we'll be looking at today. So first of all, phonics, as it's the first way that we embed the alphabetic principle and basic code into children's spelling from a very early age. We need to ensure that children understand the complexities of English orthography. And we do this by knowing their grapheme-phoneme correspondences. So that's a phoneme, which is a sound, and which letters or letter that this relates to. Orthographic mapping, which is just a way of splitting up a word. So you might have this as dots and dashes, or maybe sound buttons, you call them, or even syllables that I've got here. Looking at a best fit method. And what I mean by that, and this is what we call it on our phonics shed scheme, is by looking at a particular GPC and understanding where it's most likely to be found in a word. So if we're looking at the NG digraph, for example, ng, that nearly always comes towards the end of a word and will never be in the beginning of a word. So teaching children where different GPCs are most likely to be placed to help their spelling. Understanding morphemes. So here, for example, we've got the words medicine, medical, and paramedic, and the way that we have got those three words sharing the same root words. Then in Spelling Shed, we call them spelling patterns, and in Phonics Shed, we call them the same, and not spelling rules. And this is because rules insinuate that there is a clear right or wrong. Whereas often when it comes to spelling, there isn't, and GPCs can often be in different places in words. And particularly when we're looking at common exception words, they don't always follow specific spelling rules as such. So we call those patterns. Then we have etymology, and etymology is the history of where part of a spelling has come from. Now, orthography, in basic terms, is the conventional spelling system of a language and the study of spelling and how letters combine to represent sounds and form words. So in Key Stage 1, we start to do this by teaching phonics and making the relations between GPCs and certain spelling of different words. But as we get towards Key Stage 2, children need to be taught other spelling skills in order for them to be able to spell more complex words. Now, we advocate the use of a full systematic synthetic phonics program, which will cover all of the grapheme correspondences. Now, we have Phonics Shed, which is a full systematic synthetic phonics program, which is also validated by the DFE. You are able to take a free trial out on the website if you would like to take a look. And here are some of our flashcards and characters from our scheme. It's available digitally, so you can just get digital access, or we also have physical resources as well. And there are 44 phonemes in the English language, and phonemes are just the smallest unit of sound that you can get. And then there are about 250 graphemes, which are the way that we write those sounds. So for example, the sound I can be written IGH, a singular I, IE split digraph, or IE together, such as tie. There are lots of different graphemes and ways, which are why we need to teach children different skills to be able to understand where these spellings go within a word and how to spell more complex words as we go to Key Stage 2. Now, just as an example, the phoneme or the sound has got 4 graphemes. There are 4 different ways that we can write that sound. And this is why we need to teach children different spelling patterns and where these might go in a word. So we've got F singular as in function, double F as in cuff, PH as in photo, GH as in tough. So we know that GH and double F are never going to go at the beginning of a word. So that and teaching the children just that will help them in good stead when they're thinking about how to write that phoneme in a particular word, which one they most likely should choose. And then just as another example, the phoneme I, which I discussed earlier, we've got all of these other ways that we can write the sound I using these graphemes. Again, a lot of these are not going to become at the beginning of a word, but maybe in the middle or towards the end. And it's these sorts of things that we need to be teaching the pupils. If you do have phonics shed or are interested in it, 4C is where we really focus on things like this and different alternative spellings for a phoneme. Now, the majority of GPCs will be taught through the statutory SSP programme. In phonics shed, we cover them by the end of chapter 4B and adding and consolidating, as I just mentioned, in chapter 4C and beyond. Now, this should not be the end and the completion of the phonics scheme. A lot of time I'm working in different schools, I've seen and taught children in the end of Key Stage 1 using phonics with their phonics knowledge and as the teacher being trained within phonics. And then they go into Key Stage 2 and they might ask the teacher how to spell the word river, and the teacher will just go and spell it out using the letter names, R-I-V-E-R. Now, to that child, they're not used to spelling it in that way. We need to think about how we transition from phonics to be able to spell in more complex words and understand these different spelling patterns, which are going to have a big impact when children come and grow up and have quite a few wider vocabulary and different words that they want to be able to attempt to spell. So that's a really good thing to have to think about when starting to teach Key Stage 2 children and older, particularly when they're in year 3 and they're still heavily relying on what they've been taught in phonics. So we need to also make sure that our staff are aware and trained to make that transition really easy as they start to come away and learn more complex spelling patterns. Now, within Spelling Shed, we have different spelling lists. And if we look at different GPCs and how they are spelt, so how different phonemes have the different graphemes, the lists are generally organised around the grapheme phoneme pattern, which you can see here. So, for example, list 1 is the ow phoneme spelled O-U. So we've got mouth, around, sprout. Whereas list 2 is the same grapheme, but a different phoneme this time. It's the phoneme, so touch, double, country, etc. So we're teaching them that these graphemes have got different phonemes associated with them and vice versa. Now, within Spelling Shed lessons, we have our spelling list, which goes with each lesson, and you can assign that to a pupil for them to practice on their login. Now, the first 2 have got quite a good discussion about what do these words have in common. So then we can start to identify the spelling patterns here as we start to read them. Double, trouble, country, cousin, touch. You've got the OU grapheme or OU digraph, making the phoneme. Then we can do things such as which of these words is the odd one out. So cousin, count, couple. Now, although we've got the same letters in all 3 of these words, count is the odd one out here because the OU grapheme is making the ow sound rather than in cousin and couple. So then we need to think about how we map the word and different ways that we can learn to spell a particular word. So we've identified the pattern within all of the words here, but how can we map it? Can we split the word into syllables, for example? We split them into different syllables and looking at also, we've got similar endings here of some of the words. and using our previous knowledge in order to be able to think of different ways that we can learn our spellings in that sense. Now, on Spelling Shed, you're able to print out our word lists. I will show you that at the end, how to do that. Now I'm going to give you a quick preview of our Year 6 new Spelling Shed scheme, which is available on our Spelling Shed website for you to use. We have very detailed, in-depth lesson plans, and these are based around doing a 1-hour session per week. However, you are able to split instead, if it's more beneficial to do, instead of just 1 hour per week, splitting it up into a few minutes across the day. So across the week, sorry. So maybe it's 15 minutes each day across the week. And within these sessions, you've got your word list at the top, and you're going to revise and use some examples of challenge words. So just simply recalling and recapping, as we do at most at the beginning of our lessons. And then an introduction. So here we're looking at the etymology of some of the words and where these words come from and where the spellings derive. Then we look at the main teaching input, which again could be a separate session. Here we're looking at irregular spelling patterns and specific parts of different words. And then we've also got, finally, an independent activity, which you might want to do in class or assign as a homework task, if you would rather. Now, here's one of the etymology slides from that particular lesson. So this is showing how we're looking at where this word and spelling has come from, and relating it to the words that we are learning from this lesson and how the meanings of the different words relate here. So here we're looking at the late 14th century meaning reality from Old French existence. And then we've got the medieval Latin and Latin, meaning stand forth, come out, or emerge. And here we can see X has the meaning out, and sister meaning is to stand. And then thinking of other words which might have derived from the same meaning. So having a look at this word existence from our spelling list and where the spelling has come from. Next, we might want to use orthographic mapping to map the word, such as using syllables. So you might split this into syllables. So accommodate into the different syllables. We've got a, com, o, date. You might do that by splitting it into claps, accommodate, and doing that together. And that can also be a really good way to be able to spell and learn the spelling of the word and the different parts of the word as well. So we've got 4 syllables within this word. And then doing the same with other words such as available. So syllables can be a really beneficial way to be able to learn spellings too. And then here is another slide from one of our lessons, looking at an irregular spelling pattern in the word prejudice, and looking at why it might be difficult to decode. And that's because the ICE ending, which if we see it on its own, we would say ice, is pronounced is. And thinking of any other words that share this ending. So we're really looking closely at the different spellings and the different sounds within the word, or at the different syllables, and looking at why it might be tricky to spell and relating it to previous knowledge. And here are some other ways. Here are just some activities as well from the lesson. I really like the word shed performer. It's a really nice way to have a spelling in the middle and then find the definition, put it into a sentence, find any synonyms or antonyms as well. Here's another activity where we split each word up into syllables, so which is another really good skill of being able to learn different spellings. Now, our Year 1 new Spelling Shed scheme isn't out for you to look at just yet. So this is the first preview of what has been completed already. Now, we've got lots of sorting of words, so looking at different parts of words. So these, we're looking at the ending sound. So whether it ends in a nk, so nk, has a k, or ends in a double letter digraph, such as puff, buzz. So we're really looking at the different letters within each word. Another really good way is, again, looking at what patterns they've got in common. What can you see that's in common with these? Where is it found mostly in the word? It's either at the middle or at the end here, and really discussing with the children where, if they can think of any other words with this in, and just looking at the placement of it and the sound that it makes. And again, encouraging them to look at syllables. So all of the words have just one syllable, which are also the words which have TCH, so ch, at the end of the word. And then kitchen, which has ch in the middle of the word. And here's just another way to sort words by the sound before ch. So really looking at the different spellings in the word and the different letters, just as another way to learn those spellings and sorting all these different words. Now looking at orthographic mapping as we have done. So with the word young, you can do it in a couple of different ways. You might do it with sound buttons or dots and dashes. You can also put it into a graph or boxed up to be able to see the different sections of the word. So you've got y, ng, young. So we've split this one into the different sounds of it here. OU makes an sound in this word. Other ways of doing orthographic mapping is to look at positional best fit. So which is most likely? So we've got the long E sound, which can have got all of these different graphemes as a way of writing that sound. So which is the most likely at the beginning of words? So we've got the E split diagraph, E and EA, but never IE there. EY and Y are not found at the beginning of the words. So IE, EY and Y are never found at the beginning. So then in the middle of words, all of these are used. And then we've got IE as in chief, which is there but less common. And then EY and Y are not commonly used in the middle of the words. And then we're looking at the end of the words as well. So we've got IE as in pixie, brownie. They're most often found at the end, but are less common. EY and Y are most commonly used at the end of the words, such as trolley, chimney, story, and salty. Now, often there is not a specific reason why we spell words a certain way for certain different meanings. So here we've got story versus story. So we've got the same sound at the end of those words there. They just have different graphemes. So that's also tricky to be able to teach those within your spelling lists each week, as the children don't have a way of being able to distinguish between the two. Now, to syllabify words, we can target tricky sections. So here we've got amateur. Now, the first two syllables, are very simple. They are spelt like we sound them. It's the ch that is the tricky part of this word, and we can really target that part. So thinking about any other words which might have similar, or ways to remember this tricky part of the word. Now on social media, I have seen this before, which is, it looks a bit like gotty, but people saying that this is another way that you could spell the word fish. Now, this is nonsense because it absolutely can never be the case, because the GH grapheme is always only found if it makes a f sound at the end of a word. So that will never appear at the front of a word. So things like this are really confusing for children and are completely going against the spelling patterns which we are teaching them in class. We then have an O there to make the I sound. Now, one of the only words that this happens with is the word women. And that's where this has been taken from, as making the I sound. And then the TI to make the sh sound is when we use TION, the shun ending in a word, like detention. But again, this would never be on its own and would never make the sh sound as just TI together. Then we talk about a spelling voice. Spelling voice is a way you pronounce a word so that you are able to spell it. So for the word Wednesday, for example, I always say it out loud as Wednesday if I am to write it within my head to make sure that I spell it correctly. Now, this shouldn't have to impact and always distinguish how children need to say words, because that's not how they're pronunciated in the English language. We just call it our spelling voice to help us change how we pronounce a word to remember the spelling. So, for example, geography, we usually say geography. But if they need to change the way they need to say it out loud as they write it to help their spellings, this is a way that you can do it. But obviously, we want to then be able to take the scaffolding away after time so that they're not constantly saying and pronouncing words incorrectly. So here's just a few examples of the way we do that with different words within the English language. Government is a particular tricky one, as well as environment, as we don't say the N in it. But using something like a spelling voice or phonics voice for teaching phonics to be able to pronounce a word in a slightly different way, to be able to hear all the sounds and remember all those spellings, is just another way that you can use to learn spellings in Key Stage 2. Now what I'll do is show you quickly the Teacher Hub on EdShed for those of you that haven't got a subscription with us, and our new, where you can find the new Spelling Shed scheme if you want to use the Year 6 one, which is on there already. If you'd like to watch the recording of this webinar, you can do so by going to our EdShed YouTube channel, and the recording will be on there. For any other questions, please email support@edshed.com. But first of all, I shall change my sharing and we shall look at the Teacher Hub. So this is what it will look like. All of our resources can be found here. And the preview of the Spelling Shed 2022 most recent scheme is in here. And here you can see that with each lesson, we've got the lesson plan, the worksheets, and the PowerPoint presentation for you there to have a look at. And I've already shown you some of those today, so you can see that they're in a lot more detail than previously. Now, we have got word lists which go with each of our spelling PowerPoint. Our spelling PowerPoints go from Year 1 to Year 6. Our spelling lists or word lists can be found here, and you've got all of ours from our scheme. Stages are the same as the year groups. You can also create your own list to assign pupils, whether that's a topic specific list, or maybe you've got a group of children that just need a very personalised list to fill the gaps in their knowledge. You can also share lists with other teachers, and we call this a favourite list. So if any teachers have shared this with you, it will appear in your favourite lists. You can also print these out. So if I go to Details and click Print, this will create a PDF for you to print. So you can select the words that you want, the number of lists. These are really good for people that might need to stick them in homeschool diaries, for example, and any particular font. You can generate those. And then that will generate a PDF ready to trim up and go into pupil books, such as that. It was a test list, so I only had 2 words on this one, but they would all appear down there for you. You can easily go through and edit, delete and add words to word lists if you would like to. Now, if I go to assignments, here you can see where I've assigned particular spelling lists to particular groups. If I click on details, that will show me if anyone has played it and the percentage that they got correct. The status changes depending on how many points that they have got. You can also play something called hive games. This is another replacement of a traditional spelling test, and is a really nice way for all pupils to be able to do the spelling test, but in a bit more of an interesting way. They all need a device. You create a hive and a code comes up. They input the code on their device, and then they all take part in that hive game. Now, if you would like to take a free trial out for Spelling Shed, you can. You also have access to all of our SPAG resources and PowerPoints, and there are corresponding quizzes to set the pupils on their logins that go with each SPAG PowerPoint. I'm just going to briefly show you the game and the different games available on Spelling Shed. So within Spelling Shed, if you set work for a pupil, they don't have access to all of the stages if you don't want them to. It will just come up with the work that you have set for them. I'm just going to click on a list just so I can show you what they look like. So if I click play, they have the choice of doing it in phonics, so that means it's sounded out. Whether easy, medium, and hard have all got less choice of letter tiles, whereas extreme has got the whole keyboard.
Bottle, pencil.
And then we have some other bonus games as well. We have the beekeeper, which is the same as hangman. So for a specific list that you have set them, if there's a specific spelling pattern within that word, which there most often is, they can then quickly identify what the word is from that. Can you spell the missing word? So all of these will be on the word list.
A scary dream is often called a nightmare.
You have set for them.
Dream. He accepted our dare and rode his bike down the steepest hill of all.
And they have got their own way of choosing their own level. And then we also have another one with matching the words to the definition. So all of these games will be played on just the words of the list that you have set the child. Here's where you can also see our SPAG quizzes. Again, if you've assigned them a particular SPAG quiz, there is the option for them not to see everything, just the ones that you have set. And here's what one of those looks like. You can get them to read it if needed.
Which of the sentences below are not statement sentences? Select answers below. The fish knows that the cat cannot reach it. Is the cat hungry as it watches the fish? Stop looking at the fish.
So there are those there as well for you to use. If you'd like a little bit more in detail about how Spelling Shed works, have a look on our YouTube channel, as there are lots of tutorials and different ways, such as what data is generated and how you can use that. I hope today has been useful, and for any other questions, please email support@edshed.com.